Welcome to Sinful's Horror Stories. Tonight's video will be our Sinful Christmas special. All of these stories that you're about to hear were sent in from viewers like yourselves. I want you to deck the halls, stay jolly, stay sinful. Story number 1. My name is Luke. The story took place on Christmas Eve 2002. When I was about 8 years old. For content, my house had a front door, a back door that led out into the backyard where our old shed was, and a back gate leading into the backyard. My bedroom was located upstairs and faced the backyard. It was Christmas Eve around 9 p.m. My mom was downstairs putting the Christmas presents under the tree and getting a few things ready for Christmas Day. My dad was still at work and would be home soon, as he always worked a little later on holidays to earn a bit more money. I was up in my bedroom playing Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights on my PS2. It was Christmas Eve, as I've said, so my mom was letting me stay up a bit later and would let me see my dad when he came home from work. I was excited about staying up late and was looking forward to seeing my dad, so I kept looking out the window to see if I could see him coming home. I must have looked 3 times before I finally saw something. The back gate was open and I saw a silhouette of a man standing there. I assumed it was my dad and I waved. About 3 seconds went by before my dad finally waved back. I thought, great, Dad's home, and continued playing my game. I think 10 minutes had passed, and I didn't hear my dad come inside, so I checked outside once more. My dad was now in the shed. I could tell because a dim light was on inside, and I could see his silhouette once more. I waved again. This time he didn't wave back. I figured he was facing the opposite way. I continued playing my game. I heard my dad finally come through the front door and I went downstairs to see him. I asked him what he was doing outside in the shed. He looked at my mom with a confused smirk on his face. My dad said he hadn't been out in the shed at all. I saw him out there and I waved. He assured me he wasn't out there. My parents dismissed my claim as childish imagination. I was confused because I'm sure I saw him in the backyard, or at least someone. I guess that time in my young mind, I didn't see anything and, like my parents, dismissed it. Also, I guess as I was so young, I couldn't really see the unusualness of the situation as anything sinister. I went back upstairs and carried on playing the game, till my parents made me turn everything off and go to bed. I don't know what time it was or how long I was asleep for, but I was awoke by something. It was coming from underneath my bedroom door. It sounded like someone was messing with my door handle. I looked out my window and couldn't see anything. I thought I could see something just underneath my window, right where the back door was, but it was just too dark. I grabbed this small flashlight I had in my bedroom and shined it down towards the back door. Still, I couldn't see anything. I then scanned the rest of the backyard and saw nothing yet. I was about to put the flashlight down and go back to sleep when I took one more look towards the back door, and I'll never forget what I saw. There was a man looking up and staring at me. I didn't look for long because I was honestly frightened to death. I quickly ran into my parents' room and told them there was a man outside. My dad went to look out in the backyard while my mom stayed with me. My dad came back and said he didn't see anyone. What he did see was the back gate was open and the shed had been gone through. Also, there was a few of my dad's tools laying out on the grass. We called the police and they took down our statement of what my dad had found and also what I saw previously in the night. We never heard back from the police, and to be honest, I don't think we expected to hear anything as there wasn't much that could be done. It was pretty obvious what the man was planning to do. He got into my dad's shed with ease as we never locked it. The only thing in the shed was some old tools my dad had, and a few old rusted bikes with broken flat tires. We didn't let it ruin our Christmas, and we did have a nice day. However, from that day on, we were much more cautious of our home's safety and installed a camera and security light. As I've gotten older and the more I've thought about that night, I've thought about the guy who I waved to and the fact he wasn't spooked by me noticing him. Makes me think if he had broken into our house, his intentions weren't to steal anything. I think he had much more darker and sadistic plans in mind. Story number 2. My name is Sean and I'm 23 years old. This story happened on Christmas Eve when I was 17. My parents at the time weren't getting along very well and would end up arguing every other night. It was me, my parents, and my younger sister Zoe, who was 6 at the time, all living together in the same house. As I mentioned, it was Christmas Eve, and I thought my sister Zoe shouldn't have to listen to our parents fight, so I decided to take her out to a local mall. It would be closing in the next hour and a half, as it was close to the evening hour. We arrived at the mall and took a walk around inside. It was pretty empty, but there were still a few shops open. I took Zoe to have a look in the stores, and I brought her a cake and hot chocolate as well. There was something I picked up on as we were browsing the mall. There were 2 men that seemed to be following us. I wasn't 100% sure at first, but they seemed to stick close by everywhere we went. I tried not to be paranoid and think rationally, but I have to say they didn't look like they were doing some last-minute shopping. They looked like they were up to something. One man was in his late 40s or early 50s, and the other was in his mid-30s. As time went on, the more dead the mall got, the more these 2 men stood out. As much as these men were making me uncomfortable, I wasn't exactly eager to head home. Once we got out in the car park, there were only 2 cars left, ours and someone else's. The one thing I hoped wouldn't be true came true. Once me and Zoe got into the car, these 2 men came out the mall shortly after and got in the last car in the parking lot. I didn't start the car just yet because I wanted them to leave first, but they didn't. I couldn't see what they were doing as they were parked too far away and it was dark. I thought I would give these 2 men one last benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were leaving like us because the mall was closing. I think I must have waited about 5 minutes, all in the meanwhile Zoe asking why we weren't leaving. I didn't want to worry her, so I went on my phone and I told her I needed to look up something. I started the car and began to drive. So did the 2 men. It was at that point I really knew they were planning something malicious. As I was driving, I didn't really have a destination in mind, whether to go home or to a police station. And remember, the 2 men hadn't done anything wrong just yet. Then, the worst thing that could possibly happen happened. The car started making a weird noise, and the check engine light was blinking. I wasn't going to stop, but I had no choice, as the car cut out and slowly died. The 2 men were still following us, and as I expected, as soon as our car stopped, the 2 men pulled over. I knew we were in trouble. They were 2 grown men and I was only 17 and on my own with my younger sister. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the 2 men get out of the car and approach us. Then the only thing I could describe my next move as was pure animal instinct. I grabbed Zoe, flung the door open and ran as fast as I could down the road. I didn't look behind me. I just ran and ran. I heard footsteps, but not for long. I'm guessing the 2 men saw I was no match for them. I did hear, however, their car start. Thankfully, the road I ran down led to a gas station that was thankfully still open. I ran inside, but there wasn't any staff members. I looked out the window and saw the 2 men pull up in their car. They sat at the gas station for 20 seconds and then drove away. I guess they saw us in the gas station and gave up their pursuit. Someone came out from around back and we told them we were being chased and they called the police. I told the police about the 2 men chasing us. They escorted me and Zoe back home. The next day on Christmas Day, me and my dad went to get the car. I can only imagine what those 2 men planned on doing if they'd caught us. To be honest, I try not to think about it as much as I can. I hope Zoe doesn't think about it. I know she was very scared. Christmas Day was okay. Zoe and I were still shaken up, but I think we got some enjoyment out of the day regardless. Christmas is supposed to be a happy time, but it goes to show you that evil is always present. Story number 3. My name is Stanley. I'm 28 years old and I am a delivery driver. I've been a delivery driver for around 6 years, and always around the time of late November and December, my job gets very, very busy. Obviously because people are sending a lot of Christmas presents, as well as receiving them. Around this time, I always work more days to earn myself more money, and if we hit a certain mark of deliveries, our staff gets a bonus. Anyway, this story happened around mid-December in 2017. As a delivery driver, I have to deliver to all addresses, including the rough parts of town. There was this address I had to deliver to in a quiet, rough neighborhood, and the houses were separated by some distance. For some more background and context, whenever I deliver a package, I have this little computer scanner that I scan the boxes with, and then whoever accepts the package signs their signature on a little computer device. This is basically so we know what went where and aren't responsible for missing parcels. I grabbed 2 parcels for the house I was about to deliver to and went to knock on the door. I scanned the 2 items and it came up that there were actually 3, and I had forgotten one in my van. At that point, the door opened, and there was this very large man who answered the door. He was bald and clean-shaven, and wearing a white tank top, had a poorly drawn rose tattoo on his upper arm, and was smoking a cigarette. This guy was huge. He must have been about 350 pounds. I said, "Hey, I have a delivery at this address," and went to hand him the packages. He didn't respond. He just took another puff off of his cigarette and was looking right at me. Finally, he took the boxes from me and just said, "Thanks," in a very uninterested voice. I asked him to sign my computer device and he snatched it out of my hand. I remember watching him glide his disgusting finger over the device with his long, vile black nails. I then said, "There's another package I left in the van. I will just go and get it." He didn't respond once again at this point. Not surprisingly either, he slammed the door behind me as I walked off. I walked back to my van and got the package I had forgotten. After I scanned it, I realized something went wrong after I scanned the first 2 packages that I had given the man. I needed to scan them again, which was annoying, because I really didn't want to bother with this guy again. I knocked on the door once more and handed him the 3rd package and asked him to sign. I then told him I needed to scan the first 2 packages again, as there was a problem the first time. He then said, "Okay." That's all he said. I was expecting him to get the packages, but he just stood there. I then said, "Do you have the packages?" trying to be as polite and patient as I can. He then said, "I don't know where they are. Come inside and help me look." I was thinking, how can he not know where they are? I gave them to him less than 5 minutes ago. I said, "Can't you find them?" He replied by firmly saying, "No. Do you want to help me look or not?" There was a million red flags going off in my head, as well as my instincts saying, "No, do not go in." As I said earlier, myself and the rest of the staff were on a big bonus if we got all of our packages delivered. And not only that, people got in a lot of trouble for not scanning boxes, and even in some cases fired. Against my better judgment, I said, "Okay," and headed inside his house to look for the packages. I walked into the man's living room. The first thing I noticed was a very strong stench that almost made me throw up. The man wasn't even helping me look. He just stood behind me watching me. I then jumped because there was a huge bulldog in the backyard barking, scratching at the sliding doors. As I was looking around the living room, I saw how filthy the place was. There were empty food wrappers and empty pizza boxes on the floor, cheap empty beer cans, and a mountain of put-out cigarettes. I was noticing something that didn't seem right. There was a small cat flap on the back door, a cat scratching post, and also a small mouse on a string. It came across really strange to me. This guy didn't look like he owned a cat. I couldn't see a cat anywhere, and also there was that massively aggressive dog in the backyard who wasn't very cat-friendly. As shocked as I was by this guy's house, I carried on looking for the packages. I was then approaching the kitchen and the rancid smell got stronger and stronger. I then turned to see a basement door. Something was telling me don't open it, but curiosity got the better of me. I slowly opened the door and was in complete awe from what I had saw. There was a cat hung by a light cord by the throat, and the bottom half of the cat was led on the steps down towards the basement, covered in flies and maggots. I don't know how I managed to not throw up. I closed the basement door. I knew I had to get out of this house. This man was a maniac, and I had a very strong feeling he was about to harm me, especially after what I had just discovered. When I walked around the corner towards the living room, the man wasn't there. I don't know where he went, but the front door was still wide open. I took this chance to run outside and back to my van. I got inside and drove off as fast as I could. I didn't get far, however, because I had to pull over and throw up on the sidewalk. When I was far enough away from the house, I grabbed my phone and called the police. I told them where I was parked in my van and also the address of the house. They sent 2 patrol cars out, one to meet me and one to check out the house. When the police officers arrived at the house, the man was still there and arrested. They said they found him sat down smoking. I told my boss what happened, and obviously he was understanding of the situation. A few days later, the police got back to me. They said that the man didn't even live there. He was actually homeless and had broken into the house while the owner was away. I think he was charged with breaking and entering and animal slaughter. I'm not sure where he is now. Hopefully in jail. There's no room in society for a lunatic like that. Story number 4. My name is Daniel, and I'm 39 years old. I grew up on a ranch that had belonged to my family for years. We didn't have any animals on it. It was just a big piece of land we lived on that was next to a large forest. I lived with my dad, mom, grandpa, and our dog that was very old named Carrot. Growing up on a big ranch, I spent a lot of time outdoors, building dens, watching wildlife, going fishing, going hunting and shooting with my dad. This story took place in the year 1990, when I was 10 years old. When I used to go hunting with my dad, I used to watch him shoot his rifle. Sometimes he would let me have a try as well. On Christmas Day that year, I received the best present I could wish for. I got my very own marksman rifle. My dad said I was ready to have my own and go shooting with him. That night, my dad suggested that I go with him on a late-night hike into the woods to see if I could get my first kill. We packed with us a flask of hot tea, and I brought along my new night vision scope that was also a present I'd gotten for Christmas. It wasn't attachable to my rifle. It was just for something to look through in the dark. My dad and I set off in the snow-filled woods with the hopes of grabbing my first kill. We only had one flashlight with us, as I had forgotten to bring mine. About 20 minutes into the walk, I bumped into something. It looked like a big figure. And then my dad shined the line onto it and revealed it to be a scarecrow of some kind. The face had a gray beard attached to it, and it looked like it had real hair, and a Santa hat on top. It's very scary, to be honest. I said to my dad, "Dad, when did you build this scarecrow?" "I didn't," my dad replied. I know I was young, but I could hear the concern in his voice. I asked him who built it, if it wasn't him. "Me." He said, "You see that?" He told me he didn't know and ushered me to continue walking. Another 5 minutes into walking, my dad grabbed my shoulder. He said, "You see that?" I pulled up my night vision scope and had a quick look around. I saw what looked to be a raccoon. I said, "Yeah, I see it. It looks like a raccoon." "No, not that." He pointed up towards a hill. It was a silhouette of a man standing on the hill watching us. This frightened me. I asked my dad who he was. He told me he didn't know and that we should head back. Looking back now, I could see how bizarre it was that this man was out here. We lived on a big ranch that was also private. There was no reason for anyone to be out here, especially not on Christmas night. Right before we were about to turn around and head back, the man started to flash his flashlight at us. I'm not sure then, or even now, what his intentions were. If he wanted us to go to him, why didn't he just say something? It was odd. As we were heading back home, I could tell my dad was a little bit spooked about what happened, which was strange because I had never seen him like that. To not worry my mom, my dad told me not to say anything and keep it between him and I did. I think at the time I was too young to really grasp the strangeness of the situation. That night I woke up very thirsty, so I went downstairs to grab a glass of water. I used my night vision scope once again to see what it was. I returned to my bedroom and looked outside. I saw something standing in the grass. It was too dark to make out what it was clearly. I used my night vision scope once again to see what it was. I saw it was the same scarecrow I had bumped into earlier in the night. Someone was out there and had deliberately put it there. I carried on looking around the field and into the trees. I saw another flashlight, and another, and another. Honestly, there must have been 10 flashlights coming from the woods. I quickly ran and woke up my dad and told him what I'd saw. He didn't want to go out there alone, so he called a friend of his the next morning and they both would check it out. They didn't find anything. Even the scarecrow had been removed, but what they did find was a lot of footprints in the snow that definitely weren't mine or my dad's, confirming what I saw last night, that there were multiple people out there watching our house. We called our local sheriff and he had a look around. Even he had no idea who or why these people were doing what they did. After that night, this has had a huge impact on our lives. We started to live in fear a little bit, to be honest. The security around our house was increased, and my dad and I no longer took night hikes and only went shooting and hunting in the daytime. It's been almost 30 years. Me and the rest of my family still have no logical reason to who those people were and what they wanted with us. I know they were out to harm us, but I can't be certain. Story number 5. My name's Ronnie, and this story happened to me on Christmas Day 2016. I never knew my dad and never got along with my mom, so when I could afford it, I moved out into an apartment of my own. Things were rough for me for a while. I had to work a job I hated, and most of my meals consisted of microwave burgers, noodles, and cereal. As I was living on my own and had moved across state, I had no friends and didn't know anyone. Christmas time is the time when you feel most lonely. I went out a few times to a local bar to try to meet some people, but I didn't get anywhere. I used the dating app Tinder mainly to see if I could find a friend. I matched with a girl called Nell, and I had met up with her twice, once in a coffee shop and another time at a bar. She was okay, nothing special. Like I said, I was lonely and just wanted to not be alone. Despite only meeting twice, she asked if I wanted to spend Christmas Day at her house with her mom and have Christmas dinner. For me, it was way too soon, but I accepted as I could enjoy a Christmas dinner and have some company. The only thing I would have enjoyed on Christmas was discounted hot dogs and watch some movie on TV. I met up with Nell and she brought me to her house. When I entered the house, another girl came out of a room to greet me. My initial thought was, oh, this is Nell's sister, but surprisingly Nell introduced her as her mother. Her name was Hazel. I thought she really didn't look old enough to be Nell's mom, but I brushed it off. Her sister came across very eccentric with a lot of energy. I thought at the time it was just nerves. I asked Nell where the bathroom was. She told me to use the downstairs toilet as the one upstairs was broken. This is important for later in the story. Dinner was ready and Nell and me were sat next to each other when Hazel brought out the turkey. The turkey didn't look too appetizing. I wasn't an expert chef, but I could kind of tell it looked undercooked. Either way, I was really hungry, and this turkey was better than what I had waiting for me at home. Dinner was pretty awkward. Nell nor Hazel really said a word. I didn't know Nell as well. I had only met her twice prior to this dinner, so I couldn't tell if she was acting out of the ordinary. I tried to make conversations a few times so it wouldn't be as awkward, but both Nell and Hazel just gave vague responses. During dinner, there were a few times where I could hear what sounded like footsteps coming from the room above me. Every time I heard it, I looked at both Nell and Hazel expecting them to explain the noise, but they remained silent. I had to ask at some point, so I asked Nell if someone else was in the house. Maybe they had a brother or something. Both Nell and Hazel said we were the only ones in the house. I wasn't too paranoid, I just thought the house was old or something. After the awkward dinner was over, we sat down and watched a Christmas movie. Hazel wandered off upstairs and Nell did shortly after. It wasn't long into the movie before I started to feel sick, like I needed to throw up. So I made my way upstairs, forgetting earlier about when Nell told me the upstairs toilet was broken. I didn't know which room was the bathroom, so I slowly checked each room I passed. I came across one room where the door was slightly open, and I heard a loud whispering. First I heard, "I can't do it, you do it." And then I heard a deep man's voice say, "Give me the knife, I'll do it." My heart sank in my stomach. I took a step back. As I did so, I made a loud creak in the floorboards. The next thing I heard was heavy footsteps run towards the door flung open with a dirty-looking man wielding a kitchen knife trying to cut me. I turned around and ran down the stairs and out the door. I didn't stop running until I made it to a subway station where I threw up everywhere. I really didn't feel well, and also I was almost murdered. The only thing I was focusing on was getting home on the train. I couldn't really comprehend what just happened till I got into my apartment. I checked my phone and I saw Nell had blocked me on everything. I didn't call the police. The reason being I knew nothing would come of it. Nell had blocked me on everything, and I couldn't remember where the house was. I'd rather just forget it and move on. I was sick for about 3 days after that. It was food poisoning from the turkey I ate. It's funny that being sick from the turkey possibly saved me from being murdered. I understand why Nell told me to use the downstairs toilet. They didn't want me to find out there was a man upstairs waiting to kill me. I have no idea why they chose me. I guess I was just unlucky. Hopefully no one else falls victim to their trap. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this Christmas horror story special. I want to wish everyone a happy holidays. Merry Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you enjoyed these different stories. Please be sure to leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe for future content. Email your true scary stories to thesinfulsavant@gmail.com. I'll leave my email in the description box below as well. Till we meet again, stay fucking sinful.